she said, "I deserve better. You're lucky I'm here." So I sent her packing, with a one-way ticket home. When I look back at the first moment, I should have realized something was off. It wasn't the obvious night she came home late, or the time she conveniently left her phone face down on the table. It was something smaller, disguised as a joke, wrapped in a smile that looked harmless if you didn't pay attention. It happened at a dinner with friends. We were at a crowded Italian place, candles flickering on tables, the kind of environment where you feel obligated to laugh louder than usual to compete with the noise around you. Monica was sipping her wine, legs crossed, telling a story about how we first met. She loved recounting that moment. Me bumping into her at a bookstore while holding 3 different programming manuals, her laughing at how nerdy it was. Everyone at the table chuckled politely, and then she leaned in with a smirk and added, "Honestly, he's lucky I even gave him the time of day. I've always had options, but I figured, why not try a project for once?" The table laughed again. I forced a smile. The word project echoed in my head like a hammer against steel. I didn't call her out. I told myself it was just a joke, nothing more. But the way her friends exchanged a glance, just a flicker, almost like they'd heard this tone from her before, stuck with me. It was the first crack in the glass, and I didn't forget it. Over the next few weeks, the cracks multiplied. Small, almost invisible lines only noticeable if you tilted the glass in just the right light. Monica had this way of framing herself as the prize, as though she had descended from a higher shelf to spend time with me. She would criticize the way I dressed when we went out, not directly, but through comparisons. Maybe try something more fitted, like what Josh wore the other night. She would mention her exes casually, often praising their ambition or their sense of adventure, always phrased in a way that made me feel like I was being measured against some invisible bar I didn't even know existed. I brushed it off until the rooftop bar. That night, the city looked almost surreal. The skyline shimmered, lights reflecting off the river, laughter from dozens of conversations mixing with the hum of background music. Monica was with me, dressed in a sleek black dress, hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. She looked like someone who belonged in that environment, like the city lights had been designed just to compliment her. Her friends joined us, 2 women she often went out with, both sharp and outspoken. The conversation shifted, as it often did, toward relationships. One of them asked Monica if she ever thought about settling down, and Monica laughed, swirling her drink. "I mean, sure, but let's be real. I deserve better. He's lucky I'm even here." There it was again. Not a joke this time. Not hidden. A straight-faced statement, delivered with a casualness that stung more than if she had yelled it. Her friends laughed like it was nothing. My chest felt heavy, but I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just took another sip of my drink and let silence answer for me. That was the night everything changed. Not because I lost respect for her, but because I realized she had none for me. The following days felt like I was living in 2 different realities. Outwardly, I went through the motions, meetings at work, cooking dinner, listening to her complain about her colleagues, nodding in all the right places. But inside, a switch had flipped. I began watching her differently, not like a partner, but like someone gathering evidence. It wasn't emotional anymore. It was clinical. Monica didn't notice the change. She kept making the same comments, kept pushing the same lines, but my reactions shifted. Instead of snapping back or defending myself, I would just go quiet and mentally log it away. She told me I was too focused on work. Logged. She compared me to her ex's career trajectory. Logged. She told me I wasn't as spontaneous as she'd like. Logged. Soon, it became habit. I started keeping notes on my phone. Not dramatic diary entries, just clean, time-stamped observations. Home late. Perfume stronger than usual. Smiled while texting, locked phone immediately after. Canceled dinner. Claimed work ran over. Each entry was short, detached, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. What struck me most wasn't any single event. It was how rehearsed everything felt. Monica wasn't clumsy in her deceptions. She was careful. She would leave her phone in plain sight, but always with the screen dark. She would volunteer extra details when explaining where she had been, like she was layering in credibility. She even made a habit of inviting me to plans she knew I couldn't attend, so it would look like she wasn't hiding anything. That level of precision didn't happen by accident. It was deliberate. And the more I watched, the more convinced I became that her jokes about deserving better weren't just arrogance. They were part of a larger truth she had been grooming me to accept. But here's the thing. I don't explode. I don't throw things. I don't scream. When something threatens me, my instinct isn't to lash out. It's to go quiet, to prepare. And so I began preparing. The first step was financial. We shared an apartment, but everything, the lease, the utilities, even the Wi-Fi, was in my name. She contributed, yes, but in smaller amounts. I decided to quietly redirect more of my salary into a private account. Not because I thought she would steal from me, but because I wanted a clean exit if it ever came to that. I also reviewed our lease agreement and realized I had the legal right to remove her if needed. She didn't know that. The second step was informational. I started paying closer attention to her stories. If she said she was at yoga, I noted the time she left and the time she returned. If she claimed a late meeting, I logged the duration. It wasn't about catching her in a lie. It was about building a timeline, a framework of truth against which I could measure her fabrications. And the third step was emotional detachment. That was the hardest. I stopped expecting warmth from her. I stopped assuming her affection was real. Every compliment she gave, every kiss goodnight, I analyzed through the lens of performance. Was it genuine? Or was it maintenance? Her way of keeping the stability she still found useful? The more I thought about it, the clearer the picture became. Monica wasn't in this relationship out of love. She was in it because it served her needs, financial stability, social image, companionship when convenient. But behind that, she was shopping. She was scanning the horizon for something she believed was better, while keeping me as her anchor until she found it. That realization didn't break me. It sharpened me. One night, I tested her. Nothing dramatic, just subtle. I told her I might have to take on a project that would keep me busy for months, fewer nights out, less travel together. Her reaction wasn't concern or support. It was irritation. That means less time for us. You know relationships need balance, right? I nodded, but internally, it confirmed everything. Love adapts. Convenience complains. After that, I stopped seeing her as a girlfriend. She was now a subject, a variable in an equation I was determined to solve. And the more I observed, the more I realized she had underestimated me. She thought I was passive, the quiet man who would tolerate her cutting remarks in her games because I was afraid to lose her. What she didn't see was that silence is not weakness, it's strategy. And while she was busy laughing with her friends about how she deserved better, I was quietly building the case that would prove she didn't deserve me at all. The final push came when she left her laptop open one morning. It wasn't unlocked, but the screen glowed with a calendar notification that caught my eye. Gallery event, 7 p.m. She hadn't mentioned it. I filed it away, pretending not to notice. That night, she told me she had yoga. That was the moment I knew part 2 of this story was about to begin. The night Monica said she had yoga while her laptop calendar displayed gallery event, 7 p.m., was when I knew I had crossed from suspicion into evidence gathering. There are lies you can excuse because they protect pride, and then there are lies that rewrite reality. This one belonged to the second category. I didn't confront her. I didn't even change my expression. When she left the apartment in her yoga pants and a rolled-up mat tucked under her arm, I kissed her cheek as though nothing had changed. She smiled, reassured by the act, and walked out the door. I sat in silence for 15 minutes, then grabbed my jacket and keys. The city had a particular rhythm that evening. Streetlights buzzed awake, cars honked impatiently at intersections, and groups of people strolled in coats and scarves. I parked a block away from the gallery address I had found by a quick search and waited. It didn't take long. Monica arrived not looking like someone heading to yoga. She had changed in the car, slipping out of the leggings and into a dress I recognized. Navy blue, fitted, something she usually saved for dinners with friends. She walked quickly, scanning her phone, before slowing down as a man approached her on the corner. Tall, well-dressed, confident. They embraced. Not a friendly hug. A lingering, intimate one. Then they walked inside together. I didn't follow them into the gallery. I didn't need to. The image was enough, burned into my memory. Instead, I stayed in the car, heart racing but mind strangely calm. I wasn't devastated. I was validated. Everything I had suspected was real. The following week, I behaved as if nothing had changed. I cooked dinner, cracked jokes, even brought home flowers one evening. She seemed pleasantly surprised, perhaps even a little guilty, though she covered it well. I could see her trying to act normal, overcompensating with extra touches and random compliments. It was all theater, and I was watching from the audience with my arms folded. What she didn't know was that while she was rehearsing her performance, I was digging deeper. A colleague at work, Alex, had a side business in cybersecurity consulting. He wasn't the kind of person who asked questions when you approached him with a problem. He was the kind who just asked what tools you needed. Over coffee, I framed my request carefully. I didn't mention Monica by name. I simply said I needed help with monitoring cloud backups for personal reasons. Alex gave me a look, then handed me a few instructions and some code. Whatever you're looking for, he said. Just remember, once you see it, you can't unsee it. He was right. Within a few days, I had mirrored Monica's cloud account to a private drive. At first, it was boring. Grocery lists, random screenshots, selfies. But then I found the folders she hadn't been careful with, hidden but not encrypted. Chats, Photos, event reminders. She had been messaging the man from the gallery for weeks. His name was Eric. The conversations weren't accidental slips or mild flirtations. They were explicit. Complaints about me, gushing admiration for him, plans to meet when I was working late. She described me as useful for now, someone who gave her security, while she waited for Eric to make a move in the right direction. I sat there in front of the screen, scrolling through each message. My stomach tightened, but my head stayed clear. She wasn't just cheating, she was strategizing, using me as a placeholder until something better came along. I could have printed everything out and confronted her right then, but that would have been too easy for her. She would have cried, denied, spun the narrative until I was painted as paranoid or controlling. No, if I wanted this to end on my terms, I had to play it carefully. From that point on, every interaction with Monica felt like a scene from a play where I was both actor and director. She didn't know I had the script in advance. She would text me mid-afternoon saying she was exhausted from work, and I would check her chat logs to see her telling Eric how much she looked forward to seeing him that night. She would kiss me goodbye, perfume lingering, and I would note the exact dress she wore, the same one she had already sent him a photo of hours earlier. It wasn't just betrayal. It was choreography. Still, I didn't lash out. I let her think she had me fooled. That gave me space to build my exit. The first step was logistics. I booked 2 plane tickets. One for me, one for her. Mine was for Spain in 2 months. I had a conference there that doubled as an escape. Hers was to her parents' city, one way, booked for the same week. She would discover it only when I wanted her to. The second step was preparing the apartment. I began boxing up her items gradually, under the guise of reorganizing. Clothes she rarely wore, books she hadn't touched in months, sentimental trinkets she left lying around. I packed them neatly, labeled the boxes, and stored them in the closet. She didn't notice. The third step was patience. This was the hardest. Watching her laugh on the phone with Eric while telling me it was her mother. Smiling through dinners where she praised me for being reliable, knowing she used the same word in her chats as though it were an insult. Sitting beside her at night, her head on my shoulder, while she messaged him under the blanket with her phone tilted away from me. Every time I felt the urge to confront her, I reminded myself, not yet. Timing mattered more than emotion. Then came the night when the mask almost slipped. We had gone to a colleague's birthday party, a casual gathering at a rooftop lounge, music low, people scattered in clusters. Monica had been drinking, more than usual. She mingled easily, laughed louder than necessary, and I noticed her step away to the corner several times to check her phone. At one point, as she returned from the bar, her phone buzzed, and the screen lit up before she could flip it over. I caught a glimpse of the name, Eric. Her eyes widened for a split second, then she forced a laugh. "Just my boss being annoying," she said, tucking it away. I didn't react. I just sipped my drink. But that split-second panic told me everything. She knew the line she was walking. She knew the risk. That night, she was affectionate, uncharacteristically so, almost as if overcompensating. She curled up against me in bed, whispering compliments she hadn't given in weeks. I let her. The performance was transparent, but I played along. Because I knew something she didn't. Her act had an expiration date. The next week, I decided to push my investigation further. I wanted more than texts. I wanted presence. Proof that wasn't digital. So one evening when she said she was meeting friends for dinner, I followed discreetly. Not in some dramatic way. No trench coat or hiding in shadows. Just quiet observation. She drove to a restaurant across town, parked, and walked inside. Minutes later, Eric joined her. They sat close, leaning in, laughing like they shared a world no one else could enter. I didn't take photos. I didn't need to. The image was enough, branded into memory. What struck me wasn't the sight of them together. It was how unremarkable it looked. To anyone else, they were just a couple on a date. But to me, it was the final piece of evidence. Monica had already made her choice. She just hadn't admitted it yet. Back at home, I sat in the dark living room while she returned hours later, humming lightly, cheeks flushed. She kissed me on the forehead, claiming she was tired from catching up with friends. I nodded, pretending to be half asleep. Inside, I wasn't angry. I was calculating. The confrontation was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't just be about calling her out. It would be about dismantling the narrative she had built, piece by piece, until the truth was undeniable. But I also knew this. If I exposed her too soon, she would twist it. Cry. Claim misunderstanding. Tell me I had misread everything. And maybe, just maybe, some of our friends or her family would believe her. I couldn't risk that. I needed to time it perfectly, in a setting where there was no room for denial. So I waited, observed, built the archive of her own words, her own actions, her own contradictions. And slowly, methodically, I planned for the night when silence would no longer be my weapon. By the time the month ended, I wasn't living with my girlfriend anymore. I was living with my subject. Monica thought she was clever, balancing two lives, dropping careless lines about how she deserved better. But in reality, she was walking straight into the trap she had designed for herself. The gallery hug had started it. The messages had confirmed it. The dinner date sealed it. All I had to do now was wait for the stage to be set. And when it was, she would discover just how lucky she had been. Not to have me, but to have been given the time before I sent her exactly where she belonged. By the time Monica's parents invited us over for dinner, I already knew it was the perfect stage. Her family gatherings were always formal, even stiff. Her father worked in finance, her mother hosted charity luncheons, and they both prided themselves on appearances. Monica played into it, dressing to impress, exaggerating her achievements, presenting our relationship as if it were a polished jewel she had chosen carefully. I realized that if I confronted her in private, she would twist the narrative. If I confronted her among friends, she would mock me, laugh it off, and tell them I was insecure. But here, at her family table, surrounded by people who respected order and status, her mask couldn't hold. She would be forced to face her own words, her own duplicity, without escape. So when the invitation came, I accepted with a smile. The night of the dinner, Monica dressed meticulously. She wore a silver dress, hair straightened, jewelry subtle but expensive. She glanced at me with satisfaction, as though proud of how well we fit into her curated family image. I played along, wearing a blazer and tie, offering compliments that sounded genuine enough. The house was immaculate when we arrived. Crystal glasses on the table, polished silverware, wine decanted hours in advance. Her father shook my hand firmly. Her mother greeted us with practiced warmth, and Monica basked in the glow of their approval. At first, the evening was uneventful. Small talk, polite conversation, laughter at carefully chosen anecdotes. Monica played her part perfectly, leaning into me when her mother asked how we were doing, praising me for being stable and reliable. Her father nodded approvingly. For a moment, I could almost forget the gallery, the messages, the lies. Almost. Then her uncle, a blunt man with little sense of subtlety, raised his glass. "You've done well, Monica," he said. "Finding a man who provides stability, that's no small thing these days." The words were meant as a compliment, but to me, they were a spark to dry tinder. I felt Monica's hand tighten on my knee under the table, a subtle squeeze that told me she expected me to smile, nod, and accept the praise. I didn't. Instead, I set my glass down carefully and spoke. "Stability," I said, my voice steady. "That's an interesting word. Stability is easy when you hide the chaos behind it." The room went quiet. Her uncle frowned. Her mother's fork froze midair, and Monica's grip on my knee tightened almost painfully. "David," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't smiling. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small folder. I had printed everything, screenshots of her chats with Eric, dates, times, photos she had sent him, even the event reminder for the gallery night. Each page was precise, undeniable. I placed the folder in the center of the table. "Dramatic?" I said evenly. "This isn't drama. It's evidence." Her father leaned forward, frowning deeply. Her mother covered her mouth. Monica froze, eyes locked on the folder as though it were a snake ready to strike. "What is this?" her father asked. I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I slid the folder closer to Monica. "Why don't you explain?" Her face flushed crimson. She stammered something about misunderstandings, about how conversations could be taken out of context. Her voice rose, shrill, desperate, but the words fell flat in the silence of that pristine dining room. Her uncle reached out, flipped through the pages, and muttered under his breath. Her mother gasped softly. Her father's expression hardened into stone. Monica pushed her chair back suddenly, standing. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're trying to embarrass me in front of my family. You've clearly been spying, digging through things, twisting them into something they're not." I didn't move. I let her words hang in the air, then leaned back in my chair. "I didn't twist anything. These are your words. Your plans. Your choices." For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension was suffocating. Then, deliberately, I reached into my pocket again and pulled out a white envelope. I placed it on the table and slid it across to her. She stared at it, confused, before finally picking it up. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the paper inside. Her eyes scanned it, widening. It was a plane ticket. One way. Her name printed neatly at the top. Destination, her parents' city. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at me in shock, then back at her family. "What is this supposed to mean?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "It means your things are packed," I said calmly. "They'll be waiting by the door tomorrow morning. The lease is in my name. The utilities are in my name. The life you've been pretending to share is already mine. You're free to start fresh, back where you came from. Gasps echoed around the table. Her mother whispered her name in disbelief. Her father pushed his chair back, standing, his face a storm of anger and disappointment. Monica's composure shattered. She shouted, accused me of humiliating her, of orchestrating this like some cruel show. Tears welled in her eyes, not the tears of heartbreak, but of exposure. I stood, adjusting my jacket. Humiliation comes from actions, not from the truth being revealed. You wrote your own ending. I just turned the page. And with that, I left the table. The drive home was silent. Monica sat rigid in the passenger seat, her face pale, eyes burning with fury. She muttered under her breath, alternating between insults and pleas, but I didn't respond. When we arrived, she stormed inside, slamming doors, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply walked into the bedroom, pulled out the neatly packed suitcases I had prepared, and placed them by the door. She stared at them as though they were a betrayal worse than her own. You actually did this, she whispered. You planned this. I looked at her evenly. You planned it too. Just differently. She screamed then, a raw, frustrated sound that filled the apartment. She accused me of being cold, manipulative, heartless. But the truth was, I wasn't heartless. I had simply stopped giving my heart to someone who treated it like a placeholder. When she realized she couldn't break me with words, she fell into silence. The anger drained, replaced by exhaustion. She collapsed onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. I left her there. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Monica's suitcases were still by the door. She tried one last tactic, softness. She approached me in the kitchen, eyes red from crying, voice trembling as she apologized. She said she had made mistakes, that she didn't mean the things she had said to Eric, that she had been confused, that she wanted to fix things. I listened quietly, stirring my coffee. When she finished, I pointed to the envelope still sitting on the counter. That flight leaves at 3:15 this afternoon, I said. You should be at the airport 2 hours early. Her face crumpled. She realized then that nothing she said could undo what had already been done. By noon, she was gone. The silence in the apartment afterward was overwhelming. Not empty, liberating. The constant tension, the hidden lies, the performance, it all vanished. For the first time in months, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid. I thought of her family, the looks on their faces when they saw the truth laid bare. I thought of Eric, who would soon learn that Monica without her facade of stability wasn't the prize he imagined. And I thought of the one-way ticket, the symbol of everything she had lost not because I forced it, but because she chose it. Monica had told me once that she deserved better, that I was lucky she was even there. Now she had her chance to find out if better was waiting for her. The apartment felt different after she left. Not just quieter, emptier in a way that wasn't sad, but clean. For weeks, I had lived with suspicion gnawing at me like a background hum I couldn't switch off. Now it was silent. I could finally hear myself think again. But Monica wasn't done. Not yet. The first few days after she left, my phone buzzed constantly. Calls, voicemails, texts. Her attempts switched from anger to pleading in a matter of hours. At first, she accused me of ruining her life, of humiliating her in front of her family. Then she pivoted, saying I had overreacted, that it wasn't what it looked like, that Eric was just a friend. By the third day, her messages turned softer, filled with nostalgia, reminding me of trips we'd taken, inside jokes we'd once shared. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I blocked her number. That silence was harsher than any words I could have spoken. Meanwhile, word spread. Friends who had once looked at Monica with admiration started reaching out to me instead. Some had suspicions of their own, but never said anything. Others admitted they'd heard rumors about Eric. A few sent me screenshots of her Instagram stories that looked suspiciously curated, smiling photos with captions like, "New beginnings," or "Sometimes you have to lose to win." It was obvious she was trying to control the narrative, to paint herself as the one who had left first. But her family knew the truth. A week later, her father called me. His voice was heavy, stripped of the polished confidence he usually carried. "David," he said, "I want to apologize. We had no idea. You didn't deserve that." I kept my response polite. I told him I appreciated the call, but I wasn't interested in dissecting the past. What mattered to me was moving forward. He respected that. Before hanging up, he muttered something about Monica, needing to face reality for once. I could hear the disappointment in his tone. It wasn't aimed at me. Monica's reality hit faster than I expected. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Eric had backed away almost immediately after the dinner blow-up. She had apparently shown up at his apartment unannounced, suitcase in hand, expecting him to welcome her. Instead, he told her she was too much drama. He blocked her number within a week. That was when the cracks in her facade really widened. She called one of her friends in tears, who later relayed the conversation to another friend, and eventually it circled back to me. Monica was furious, not just at me, but at Eric for abandoning her after she had given up everything. She couldn't see that it was her own arrogance that had left her stranded. In the span of 2 weeks, she went from telling me I was lucky she was with me to crying about being unlucky that no one wanted to stay. And the cruel irony was that she had written the script herself. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online, didn't tell stories at parties, didn't seek validation. My satisfaction came from the silence, the knowledge that while she scrambled to control the fallout, I was already moving on. Spain helped. The conference there gave me distance, both physical and mental. I threw myself into work, presenting projects, networking with people from across Europe, expanding my circle beyond anything Monica had ever bothered to understand. For the first time in years, I felt unanchored from her orbit. I could make decisions without wondering how she would twist them. At night, walking through the narrow streets of Madrid, I thought about her less and less. The messages, the folder, the one-way ticket, all of it began to feel like a finished chapter in a book I didn't need to reread. Of course, unfinished stories have a way of resurfacing. 3 weeks after the conference, when I was back home, Monica showed up at my building. She must have used an old trick, waiting outside until someone else walked in. When I opened my apartment door, she was standing in the hallway, disheveled, clutching her phone like it was the last rope keeping her from drowning. "David," she said softly, "please, just talk to me." I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, calm but firm. She launched into a speech. How she had made mistakes. How she realized Eric wasn't who she thought he was. How she wanted to try again, rebuild, make things right. She spoke quickly, as though speed could outpace the truth. Her eyes darted between mine, searching for any sign of weakness. I let her finish. Then I handed her the same envelope I had kept on the counter. The one with her one-way ticket. It had expired, of course, but the symbolism remained. "You already had your chance to go home," I said. "You chose differently. This door doesn't open for you anymore." Her face crumpled, fury breaking through the tears. She spat insults, called me cold, ungrateful, pathetic. But the words had no weight anymore. They were echoes bouncing off walls I had already reinforced. I closed the door before she finished. She didn't come back again. The aftermath settled like dust after a storm. Friends stopped asking about her. Her social media presence dwindled. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets. She was staying with her parents, trying to find work, struggling to regain her footing. But those updates mattered less and less to me. Her story was hers now. Mine was separate. And with that separation came clarity. I realized how much of myself I had muted during our relationship. The constant second-guessing, the need to measure my worth against her shifting standards, the quiet tolerance of her jabs disguised as jokes. All of it had chipped away at me. But in the silence that followed, I rebuilt. I rediscovered how it felt to make decisions without waiting for approval. I remembered that being stable wasn't a weakness, it was strength. Monica had mistaken consistency for complacency. She thought reliability meant lack of ambition. She couldn't see that the very traits she mocked were the foundation of a life she couldn't sustain on her own. And in the end, the one-way ticket wasn't just her exit. It was my release. Months later, when people asked me about the breakup, I didn't give them the dramatic version. I didn't talk about the confrontation at her parents' house, or the folder of evidence, or the plain ticket across the table. I simply said, it wasn't working. She wanted something else. I let her go. That was enough. The details belonged to me. The satisfaction of watching the truth collapse her narrative was mine alone. I didn't need applause for it. All I needed was the quiet knowledge that I hadn't lost control. I had taken it back. In the end, Monica's words came full circle. She told me once, "I deserve better. You're lucky I'm here." Maybe she was right, in a way. She did deserve something different. But what she didn't realize was that I deserved better too. And the difference between us was simple. I found it by walking away. She, on the other hand, was still trying to convince herself that she hadn't been sent packing with nothing but a one-way ticket back to the life she thought she had outgrown.